Suzuki have a wonderful habit of producing sleeper bikes, like the kind of bikes that build cult followings. The DRZ 400, the DR 650, the V-Strom 650, the RMZ and the RMX. Ask an owner and you'll probably find a die-hard fan. They'll probably tell you it's more than the sum of its parts. Outside of that, they have more of a mixed reputation. They're rarely exciting or filled with cutting-edge tech. The truth is that Suzuki mostly ship bikes that are balanced, well put together and represent pretty good value. The V-Strom 800 DE is exactly that. It's also got one of the best adventure riding engine packages in the 800 to 900cc range. It's torquey, it's punchy, it's smooth, and every single person that I've seen ride one makes them smile from the first turn of the throttle. Genuinely, it's a total peach. But like the majority of adventure bikes, it has a few quite significant shortcomings. Mostly, I think it feels a bit weighty and the suspension is softer than warm chocolate mousse. In my review, I hypothesized that the DE suspension might be decent enough to get it working well, so on my trip to Canada, I spent a few days on the Outback Motortech upgraded test bike version. Every year for the last few years, Lorry from Outback has bought the bikes they need to develop parts for. Like you and me, he loves cool bikes, and so when he's done doing this to them, he makes them cooler, and that's exactly what he set out to do with the V-Strom. As with the Transalp 750, Lorry took it to Chuck from TrueTech. By the way, if you like mechanical moto stuff, Chuck has an incredible YouTube channel where he shows you how he does his job working on dirt bikes. I'll pop a link in the description below. And when you're setting the spring rate, so you're aiming for that kind of 10% static sag, 30% rider, roughly.
Yeah. On the rear. On the front, it's more. It's less. It's
so 25%.
Yeah, I think about it. I think about it imperial. I think about it 1/3 of travel in the rear for rider sag, and 1/6 of travel in the front.
Okay. Yeah. Which again, so if we look at the V-Strom, for example, like the one you had here, it was about right in the rear, but the front is a bajillion miles out, like not even.
Yeah, it was like 100% off. If like what it should be. There was twice as much sag as there should be.
Yeah.
Right, a rider sag. And that's almost the worst case scenario, because if the rear is doing what it's supposed to do and the front is sagging low, basically you're putting a steeper rake angle on it.
Yeah.
And you're affecting the trail, and it just becomes really twitchy, especially at speed. It's dangerous. I don't know why.
And when you did with the V-Strom, you've kind of gone through the same process. You pulled the forks apart, revalved them as best as is possible. Was there a mid valve in both sides?
On the V-Strom, the main thing that I did was just put the biggest part was just put 20 weight oil in.
Okay, yeah. So thick.
And the springs.
Yeah. So respring it, thick oil, but the valving's probably about the same.
It's pretty much the same. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So with the V-Strom, there's no specs that I was able to find at all. So in that case, it's not too big a deal. It's a little bit time consuming, but basically I just measure the travel, and that gives me a starting point, and then I measure the static sag and the rider sag, and then I measure the physical size of the springs, and I rate test them, and then we can get a pretty close idea about what they should be.
Yeah.
It's totally in the ballpark.
Yeah, okay, cool. And that's it, which is like not far off if someone knows the spring rate. So it's like you can do that at home sort of thing, do you know? Or a good local mechanic can do it, do you know?
The difficulty is the spring rate tester.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what the spring rate is, I mean, you can count, you can measure the wire diameter of the spring, and you can count the coils, and there are calculators online that will tell you roughly what the spring rates are. But a lot of adventure bikes, and the V-Strom 800 is no different, it uses a progressive fork spring, which is very frustrating.
Yeah. And horrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a joke.
Yeah. Cool. I was a little surprised and a little disappointed in the spec of the Suzuki suspension. From the outside, I think it looks beefy and the clickers do actually do something. Long story short, I guess my take in the review of this bike wasn't that accurate. So a quick note here and something to pay attention to. The test bike that I had for our review video was not running the same rear shock spring as this one. Ours was a mile softer. I don't know what's going on here, but it did make life a lot easier for Lorry, as the stock shock spring was roughly the correct spring rate. Alongside the suspension, Lorry just tidied the V-Strom up a little. The monster stock exhaust was swapped in favour of a beautiful Yoshimura RS12. This is an exhaust that I've used before on the T7 project, and it is a stunner. And from there, he used the same parts as on his Honda Transalp: Barkbusters VPS, Motos tyres, and double take mirrors. The V-Strom is also fitted with Outback Motortech's protection combo that includes crash bars and a sump guard that are designed to be bulletproof level strong. Lorry tests his stuff by smashing bikes into the ground, and I've got a ton of faith in it. Here's the thing with the V-Strom. It does have some shortcomings. You don't need to be told these, everyone already has told you them. But I can forgive all of those for how good this engine is to ride. It takes 0.864 of a second for it to make you smile, and I don't think I ever stopped smiling when I was riding it, ever. It kind of goes in a bucket of things that I think Suzuki are incredibly underrated for, and the changes to the 800DE only really brought these out a little bit. With the Yoshi, the exhaust now sounds obscenely good, and the engine pulled hard down low, and it kind of never stops pulling. It's so smooth and so torquey that it feels incredibly fast, but the power is also terrifically manageable. The exhaust doesn't really ruin any of that either. There are other quick adventure bikes. The KTM 890 is rapid, but it just doesn't have the same placement in the torque curve that makes it so enjoyable to ride. That bike is wild. The T7 has some nice low down torque, but the 800 it gets everything in the right place that it feels ridiculously good to ride. It does not feel like a parallel twin. Without backing it, I'd say that it feels a little freer revving and punchier than the stock exhaust does. I could be talking crap, but that's my feeling at least. Now if you combine that with the super slick quick shifter, and I genuinely think that Suzuki have built an engine that is going to be around for a decade, maybe even to the end of the combustion engine era, it is that good. It's something that I think Japanese brands, and specifically Suzuki, are very good at. Most of the time they ship bikes as cohesive packages, even if they don't look exciting. Tokiko brakes don't get people frothing as much as a Brembo Stylimo seems to, but they are fantastic. As an ideology, they seem to take less risk, but what they do works so well as a cohesive package that I don't think this should be overlooked in your purchasing decisions. The slick gearbox, the good brakes, the nice clutch, and the really comfortable riding position on the V-Strom make it a superb gravel road bike. But really, what you're here for is to see if spending that small amount of money on the suspension and the exhaust gets you a little bit closer to something else. It gets you further down the road, it lets you ride quicker, but it isn't a magic bullet. This comes to a wider conversation about adventure bikes and the base suspension products that they're shipping with. Some of this is also a little side effect of the V-Strom's frame and chassis as a whole, but we'll come to that shortly. The limit of what's achievable comes down to the specification of the standard suspension. Inside the forks, you'll find tiny valves that provide very little control compared to the kind of suspension you'll find on any dirt bike from the last 20 years. That makes changes and control over the oil flow through the suspension very difficult, and ultimately there is a ceiling to what's achievable with that stock stuff. We'll do a full video on this at some point, but for now, that's what we've experienced here. The forks are better than stock, that is without question. Now the stock shock has this ultra soft plow through the chattery stuff like an ocean liner, but it's entirely incapable of dealing with big or harsh hits. It's like a pillow, and I know some of you love that. If you ride rocky tracks or washboards, it probably feels incredible. If you ever hit a sharp-edged hole or a G-out, your ancestors will feel it. Now the fork changes mean that the moment that it all collapses and feels horrible has moved a lot further down the road. The hole has to be much bigger, and we've got some control back over the standard setup. I could hit something and not die, or panic anywhere near as much, and it let me flow along the trail a lot more than before without really having to be so cautious with my line choice. It did become a little more deflecty off the small chop, like sharp rocks in the trail, and maybe that could be dialed in a little bit on the clickers. I think some of you might call this plushness, but I didn't really bother trying because it's not bad. We're in a really good place. I think the side-to-side slosh that you get at slow speeds with overly soft suspension is reduced, but the shock was still a huge limit. I wasn't wearing the top tier Liat 5.5s I often wear when I'm riding. I had my 4.5s on for this trip because they're a nice adventure boot. and there were multiple times when my ankles were not happy with me. Dropping it into a hard hit would completely collapse the shock, and I don't really know what you can do about it. If you're going to use this bike as Suzuki set out for people to use it, cruising dirt roads, then I wouldn't worry. But if you're looking for a little more, then you're probably looking to upgrade the shock to something better. The big feather in the V-Strom's cap, however, is that it felt balanced. Compared to the Transalp from the previous video that required me to figure out what was going on with the setup and tweak it, the V-Strom setup didn't really seem to care. Maybe it came perfectly balanced from Chuck, but for once, I got on the bike and I rode it. I didn't touch a clicker, move a handlebar, or do anything other than ride and smile. Now, can we take just a little minute to appreciate Canada? The amount of land, the access, the variety is wild. I saw 3 moose in a week, I rode for hours without seeing anyone, and had some of the biggest ice creams of my life. It was pretty cool. After 3 long days riding the V-Strom, I learned some stuff. I learned that pecan ice cream is banging, moose are huge, and I also learned that while most production bikes benefit from spending some money on them, sometimes better gets in the way of a good time. We'll never stop fiddling, that's part of the fun, right? But in this case, the V-Strom just worked well as it was. After all, these bikes are for exploring, for seeing the world, and with some thick oil and some stiffer springs, the V-Strom is a great tool for that. In the guise Lorry had his bike, I'd be more than happy with it. We rode some techie bits, we rode some flowy bits, and mostly just enjoyed the hell out of it, and ultimately, that's what the end goal should be. I'd love to finish this video by saying thanks to Lorry, his family, and his friends. They welcomed me into their lives for a week, and it was an incredible time. Outback are a small, family-owned company making some very cool parts, and they've been a huge supporter of the videos we make for a long time. Thanks a ton to them, and thanks for watching.